Welcome back to the Seven Figure Builder Show. This is your host, Julie Baranek, and I'm here with my friend, Casey Stubbs. Hey, Casey.
Hi.
Hi. And you have an amazing story to tell. You've got multiple streams of income. You're a published author. You do trading. You do all sorts of really cool stuff. So I'm super excited to dig in today. But tell us a bit about what it is that you do and kind of what brought you here.
Okay. Well, I am a business owner and trader, and I got started in the trading business in 2008. The market really collapsed, and I was in construction, couldn't find work. So I thought, what the heck? Why not start a website? And then that's how I started my trading business from there. And the website grew. And today I am full time in business, online business, been doing it ever since 2008.
I love that. That's awesome. And it's been a bit of a journey, I know, but tell us a bit about kind of the story behind it and what brought you here.
Well, you never know when a tough situation is actually a good thing, right? So when you're younger, starting out, and you're trying to support a family and you lose your job, that's a little stressful. You just, oh man, what am I going to do? Right. So couldn't find work and just tried everywhere because I was in construction and there just was no building going on then. And so I had a little bit of background in finance because I've been investing since I was a teenager. And I had some background in computers and I'd built a couple websites and things like that. So I thought, you know what? I'll just take these two things that I do as hobbies and try it out and see what happens. And so I threw together a website, and fortunately for me, the traffic really started to take off. It was just a blog. Back then, I think the timing was probably right because everybody was laid off and people were looking for other things. Plus, it was in the blogging age.
Mhm.
Nowadays you could start a website and there's like 2 billion websites on the planet, and the chances of what happening to me would be a lot more difficult. With that being said, I did hustle. I was writing content every day and I was submitting my articles to article directories. I was going to big websites and trying to get attention. And so a few of those efforts that I was doing to get attention actually worked. So it's not like it was a total fluke, but it was definitely very fortunate.
Nice. And what was your goal with the website and how did that tie in with finance?
Well, I really was just writing about stuff that I knew. So that was where the trading come in. And this is the funny thing about business and I would just say the funny thing about business and life is that I found an article and it was called How to Make $1,000 a Month Online, right? And the article had step-by-step instructions. And it was uh, it was written by a website called Associate Programs. And the thing about that was just so crazy is it's not like I did anything that was brilliant. I just followed the instructions. And I just kept doing it over and over and over again. And what they wrote in that article actually worked. And over the years, people have asked me, "Oh, what did you do?" And so I'd send them back to that article. And nobody's ever followed through with that, and the same thing happens in trading. I do teach education and trading and online trading, and it seems like maybe 1 out of 1,000 of my, and this is kind of sad, but if your listeners are business owners, they can probably understand this. Probably 1 out of 1,000 of my students actually take seriously the instruction and training that I give them.
Yeah. Well, and it speaks a lot to what you actually do with it, right? Like the instructions can be golden. And, that article that you found was one of those pivotal moments for you, but 1,000 other people probably read it and thought, whatever, I'm not going to really do anything with it.
Yeah, no, the key is actions,
Mhm.
right? There's an abundance of information online, tons of good stuff and golden nuggets. And, now podcasts are everywhere. You got people like me, blah, 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 great tips. But you got to be able to grab something and make it happen. And so I go to a lot of events. That's another little secret. I go to a lot of in-person events, right? Conferences and networking and all that cool stuff. And when I go to one of those events, I'm usually overwhelmed. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hydrant. It's like, oh man, I could do 500 different things here. What do I do? But I have this thing where I go through my notes And I always take at least one thing that I'm going to implement, right? There might be 5 million different ideas, but there's going to be one thing that I'm going to implement. And I always hold myself to that. It's like if I came here, I spent the time, I spent the money, I'm not leaving without doing this one thing. And that's actually how I got started into podcasting. Because in 2008, I went to, not 2008, 2018, I went to San Diego, which was the Traffic and Conversion Summit, all about converting online traffic. And they said, it's the year of the podcast. You've got to start a podcast. So I was on the plane. I said, I am starting a podcast.
I love that. I love that. And back to the action, the other piece is the grind, right? Like so often, both from the podcasting, from pretty much everything you do, you've got to put in that grind and that hustle, even when it's not fun, right?
Well, Julie, the grind. I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that, and I'm sure you know, but the grind is the worst part because I come up with this great plan. Okay, we're gonna start a podcast. And you're
Done.
just it's wonderful, and all the work to start it is great, but then you got like two listeners, you know. So you're
Yeah.
doing all this work day in, day out, day finding guests, doing everything you got to do, and there's no fruit. And that's where the grind comes in. The fruit is really the hard part. And that's why I think people just get discouraged along the way because they don't see any traction.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny with podcasting. I always think the worst part of podcasting when you start is that nobody's listening to you when you start. But the best part is nobody's listening to you when you start. Like you can screw up and be awful and it's okay. You're gonna learn and go. And eventually you're gonna get more traction than you feel like you have when you start, right?
Yeah, that's funny because even now I'm not like an overly polished kind of guy. There's different types of personalities in business, and I'm I'm like what you would call a quick start.
Mhm.
And so I'm all about getting it done. I'm not so much about making it pretty, right? So even now, I don't do a lot of editing and things like that on my podcast, but I do pride myself on getting a lot done.
Awesome. I love that. And you've got multiple streams of income, right? Like we talked about a couple, but what has that looked like for you and how has that, made an impact for you?
Well, I think I'll start with my first one was working, right? You got to have that job, the job, and
Mhm.
then taking that revenue from the job and then investing it, right? That's to me, that's the number one thing that is so overlooked in today's society. It is just mind-boggling. So, a quick story of 18-year-old me. I joined the military, and $800 a month was what I made for the whole month. Like that's just ridiculous low, right? I mean, that's like wow. But they pay for your food, they pay for your
Right.
housing, but everybody there they're you live with all these guys in a big barracks, right? So you just get all these different personalities from all walks of life. It was just so cool, but everybody was living paycheck to paycheck, right? They get paid and it felt like it was their duty to spend everything they got that day. DVD players, TVs, VCRs, hey, we got a chow hall with free food, but let's go ahead and go out to eat every night,
Of course.
And me, on the other hand, I would just put all my money in the market, right? I just threw it all in. I would save a little bit for going out or whatever, travel, but most of my money was going into the markets. And it was funny because the guys would feel sorry for me, right? Because I didn't have a lot of clothes and I would keep the military, the wool blanket on my bed, which was like scratchy and would rub your skin off. But I didn't even buy any more blankets. The guys would donate clothes to me and they would donate, like one guy gave me a comforter. It's like, guys, you don't have to do that. I'm not broke.
Right. This
But
is my choice.
but the whole point of that's yeah, but the whole point is when I got out 4 years later, as a very young man, I had over $30,000 in the market.
Wow.
And so cash flow tip number one, invest on the top of your revenue.
Absolutely. And thank you for your service, by the way. We come from a military family and my son is in the service too. So thank you for
Wow, cool. You're
that.
welcome.
Yes. Yeah. So how did that play out for you then? Like you come out and you've already got that cash and you already have figured out, okay, something's working here.
Well, I'm a very aggressive type person, so I thought, you know what, I'm just going to sell everything and roll it into my first business because got out of the military, I was working for a guy and I saw what he was doing. He was a carpet cleaner, and I'm like, oh man, this guy's taking home $1,000 a day. I'm just going to do what he did. So I sold all my stock and jumped into a business, and I've been in business off and on ever since. I was a pretty young then, so didn't have any training experience, kind of drove that into the ground, and but then just started over again.
Yeah. And that's one nice thing about business, for better, for worse, that the lessons, at least the smart people, but the lessons that we learn the painful way, hopefully feed what we're doing in the next iteration. So it's a little less
Yeah.
painful the next time.
Yeah, you got to learn. You live and you learn, and I think that's the where you learn is the experience side of things. And you don't know what you don't know, and you're not going to learn if you don't try. And a fear of failure holds many people back. And you talk to me on the show, and I have all these great stories and great tips and all that, but really, I've got like five things that worked out of like 10,000 things that didn't work. So,
Right.
I've got a long history of trying crazy stuff that didn't work, but I'm not going to talk about those.
Right. Exactly. So to
Yeah.
that point, what are the five-ish, or, the things that you found that have worked really well for you?
Well, so the big one was investing on the top. Then the second big one is starting that website, right? That was just really awesome. And what I learned from that is you drive traffic and you collect the email, and you have traffic and email, and that's really an amazing revenue source because it's passive in a sense, and it's really passive for me because right now I have a website, I don't do anything for the website, and then I have emails, I don't do anything either, people do the emails for me, so it's really passive revenue. People create content, they send the emails, and it delivers revenue. It's a marketing, it's how marketing works. It's all about attention and eyeballs and content and a good message and a good offer. But just doing that has created a really great source of revenue for me. That's my main source of revenue to this day. And additionally, my other sources of revenue are my book. I just, because of my website and podcast and my social media, a publisher reached out to me. I didn't even really have to go after it. And they said, hey, do you want to write a book? And I said, well, it just so happens that I did write one. It's just sitting in my notebook here. So let's use that. And they're like, okay, sounds good. But then that's been a great source of revenue. And they always say, don't write a book really to make money, do it to open up doors. So it has opened up other doors, but I do get revenue too. Same with the podcast. I started the podcast to create revenue, which it has done tremendously, because one of the things that I do is uh, I ask guests to be on my show that would be great clients for my business, for my marketing business. Like, okay, I invite traders that are really good at trading, but then they need some traffic, and I happen to have a lot of traffic, so they become great customers. You become a really good friend with them on the show. You make them look amazing, and then they feel all warm and fuzzy, and you're best friends. And then you're like, hey, by the way, do you need any traffic? Yeah, man, give me some traffic. And it's just a great way to do selling because I don't really like to sell.
Mhm. I agree 1,000%. And I found that podcasting is so powerful for that relationship-based lead generation, like genuine, authentic connection with people. And what we're talking about for those listening, it's not a bait and switch, but it's a being strategic of who you're connecting with, building a genuine relationship with them, and then you can help them. So it's just a natural flow and conversation to, well, how can I help you? Right.
Right. It starts with a service heart in my
Mhm.
mind. I want to really bless the person on my show. I
Right.
want them to feel good, and I want to get them traffic, and I want them to get, you know, get eyeballs on their education. And so when you say it's not a bait and switch, that did bring back some negative memories just because I have been a guest on shows where they're just about they've built the system. Right.
Right.
And I'm a systems guy, so that's good, but they've got this perfect system. They get every podcaster in the world, and they just sell, sell, sell. And you know that when you're on the show, they really don't value you. You're just one of the numbers in their system.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's all about your energy and your intentions, and people read that, they sniff that out. So I think it's a very powerful approach in podcasting. Obviously, I'm a big fan. It's such a
Yes, yes,
powerful
and
way.
I love what you're doing, and another thing with podcasting is the relationships, right? I had a guy that was a guest on my podcast invited me to a private island to attend a conference, and it was like $10,000 a ticket, and he just gave me the ticket in the British Virgin Islands. It's
Wow.
like, wow, I like podcasting now. That was fun.
Yes. Exactly. I know. I have a conference I'm going to this weekend. It was the same experience. I had the founder on and he's like, "Here, come." I'm like, "I'll be there," you know? So
Yeah,
it's amazing the relationships you build.
it is so cool. I got invited to a conference and we were roommates. It's like, hey,
Nice.
let's be roommates. It's like, okay,
Sure.
cool. And now we're good friends.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And just one thought back to you mentioned about email, and I know you do a lot with that, but I'm sure a lot of people feel like that may be an outdated means of communicating with people or marketing your business, but it's not, and I can attest to that. But what have you found with that?
Well, email really is the number one in the world for direct mail to this day. I mean, there's been a lot of people that have said email's dead, social media is better. And in some sense, maybe social media is better in some areas. Like, if you're an influencer or something of that nature, I would say that maybe it would be better. But really, email is very powerful. It just, the numbers never lie, right? I know I've got formulas built out where I know that if I get certain number of clicks, certain number of conversion rate, that I'm going to make a certain number of dollars. And so all of my effort is geared towards collecting email. And the main thing is very similar to the podcast, right? I'm with email, I'm just trying to create a relationship and I'm trying to deliver value. I'm trying to deliver content that people really can relate to, that they can use, that they need. And so when I do that, I'm just being able to build my relationship on a mass scale.
Yeah. And the other thing, thought to add to that is social media, you can build the biggest presence in the world and have a million billion followers, but if you get shut off or hacked, you own none of that. And I think
Right.
people forget about that, where it's like, oh, I need to build my presence. But at the end of the day, if Zuckerberg tells you no, you're screwed. So, like
You
your
know
email
what? And it
is the
happens.
only
Look
thing
at
you own.
YouTube. Look at
Mhm.
YouTube. And YouTube cancels people,
Mhm.
right? Just for whatever reason. Oh, you wake up today, you're canceled.
Mhm.
And so they can't do that with email. But I do have an email story that I think your listeners, if you're interested in starting an email list, do it because it's going to bring revenue. I promise. You're going to have to learn a few things along the way, but it will bring revenue. But here's a tip. When I first got started in email, my list was growing really fast. And for whatever reason, the company didn't tell me it was AWeber. They just said, we're shutting you down. You have grown too fast, and we don't like the click activity. So maybe there was too many spam complaints. I don't know. But they shut down my email and they would not give me my list back. Right. And I'm like, you have to give me my list back. That's my livelihood. They're like, no, we don't. We are keeping the list. And it's like,
Wow.
yeah. So I was really frustrated. I was early in business. So now what do? I download my list. So all the names are on my end. I control them, and I have multiple platforms of sending email because that could still happen today.
Yeah. No, and I think that's so important that we need our data that we're collecting that people are giving to us, of course. We need to be able to have that, right? That you don't just give it to somebody and then get shut out and you're screwed again. So it's yeah,
Right.
really, really important. I agree.
Yeah. So collecting your list and also having a web presence is important because again, a Facebook, like I just a new guy I was just getting counsel with. He's like, yeah, I'm going to start my Facebook page. I'm like, maybe you should start a website. I mean,
Yeah,
they can't take it from you.
yeah, for sure. And I know obviously as you've grown your team, but how has that looked like, what does that look like for you as far as, building out that team? You can't do everything yourself, right?
Yeah, so that's really important. And it's just a lot of this stuff all ties hand in hand. They all kind of go together, but building in my team has been just amazing because the relationships that I have had with my team members is just mind-boggling, right? Just such the it's just such a blessing to have some of these people in my life. They just add so much value to me. One of the very first people I hired at 19 and he was in college. And he was doing really well. He was my affiliate manager because he would get affiliate deals for me. And he was 19. I was sending him to New York, and his mom didn't like that, so she went with him to New York. He didn't tell me that his mom went with him, but I sent him on a business trip. But he's like, I'm taking my mom, and she stayed with him in the hotel room. Um, and he was in college, and then halfway through, he's like, I'm quitting college. He's like,
Wow.
this is just so good. And I paid him a really big bonus, and I'm like, sure, go ahead. But then, he had a big fight with his parents because they didn't want him to quit college.
Yeah.
And but anyways, that was how long ago? A long time ago, because I've been in business 15 years, and now, he's gone out on his own and doing great things, and we still have a great relationship, and I do deals with him, he does deals with me. And so just me being able to train them, launch them out, send them out into the business world has been a really huge blessing and has come back to me time and time again. And so here's my little secret with how I do it. And I don't know, other people have other methods, but I just basically try to work myself out of a job and I duplicate myself, right? So I just want him to think like me, not like I want a clone or whatever, but I just want to, everything I know, I want to
Mhm.
dump it so that there's like two of me.
Yeah. And that's working smarter, not harder, right? When you can have somebody else that will know and expect, what it is that you have in your head, that's invaluable.
Yeah. And then it's better if they're smarter than you too.
Right. Yes. I know. I always try to surround myself with people that are smarter than me. So yeah, I totally agree with you. And I'm curious, you've accomplished so much in your business, personally, professionally, but how do you define success? What does that look like to you?
Oh, well, success is really all about relationships, right? It's about having great people in your life and taking the time to develop those relationships and to really putting that first and to be intentional about it. And I would say on top of that, just for me, it's been able to really manage my own schedule and to do the things that I want to do. And one of the things I want to do is to work on my relationships.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're only as strong as the people that we have around us sometimes, right? Like we need those people to help us through the hard times and be there, as we're growing as well.
Yeah, and you never get a second chance at life. And so don't don't how am I trying to say this? Just focus on being humble and building your relationships. And I just say this from a very raw place just because my dad recently passed away, right? And so I would go every summer because I live in Pennsylvania and my dad would live in Oregon. We would take our family because I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm very blessed, thankful. We would drive all the way across the country to go visit my dad, right? And so sometimes it's like, oh, this is long. I did it in purposefully and intentionally because I
Yeah.
knew it was important. But then after when your dad passes away, you look back on that and you're like, man, it was worth it.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. I know I had that with my grandparents and my parents also, but my grandparents, it just reminds me so many hours sitting with both of them. And I actually recorded their autobiography. Like I would just sit at the kitchen table recording it, ended up transcribing it when I was working night shift when my kids were little, and we turned it into a book. And like, just to have their life story for me is priceless. And those recordings. I still have the recordings. They both since passed, quite a while ago, but just having those recordings is one of my most prized possessions.
Now,
Like,
was that your idea to do that?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What gave you the like why did you do that? Like what put that idea into your head?
I'm kind of an old soul, and I just had a lot of respect for their experience. And my grandfather was in World War II. He was a paratrooper. Like they had all these stories, and I could see them
Yeah.
getting older. I did professional photography for a while, so I would go over and like intentionally take pictures and just do photo shoots with them. And those photo shoots, like I remember the one photo shoot, and I remember taking this picture of him sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm like, that's going to be in his obituary. And it was. And,
Wow.
like powerful. So,
Yeah, no, I was just asking because that was just such a cool thing to do. I did something similar, but yeah, that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah, it is. It was cool. And we were able to get, as my grandfather was in the hospital, we were able to get him the manuscript from the book and like he could have it and hold it. And then we got it printed after he passed. And my grandmother then had the printed version and, just their life story. So to me, those are some of the best memories, just sitting at the
Yeah,
table, having tea with my grandparents and, they're priceless.
absolutely. And that is success.
For sure. And I'm curious, if you had the attention of the whole world for 5 minutes, what would you tell them?
Attention of the world would be that's a pretty easy one, and that is, seek the Lord and God is good, and you know, be serious about that and really seek truth.
Yeah. And that's the number one relationship, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Everything else follows suit after that. So I agree with you totally. Awesome. Well, thank you, Casey, for being on today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, Julie. I really appreciate being on.
Yeah, of course. And if you found value in this episode, please do share it. Oh, and how can people find you? I'm sorry.
You know what? They can find me on my website, tradingstrategyguides.com. You can learn about trading. You can get access to my book there, and you can also find my podcast, How to Trade It, but it's all located on my website, tradingstrategyguides.com.
Perfect. And we'll have all the links down below in the show notes. I'm getting caught up in stories and ahead of myself. But yes, if you found value in this episode, please do share it. That's how people find us. And you can find me at sevenfigurebuilder.com. And I'll see you in the next episode.